Hello, thanks very much, Stefan. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it. What I'm going to do today is tell you a story. It's a story of the fall and rise of luxury marketing, of how companies are going to have to shift gears, I think, to accommodate the changes going on in the world, some of which you've heard about already this morning, and how leadership will look very different from how it used to do, even a few years ago. And it's a story about change, so I'm going to start off a long, long time ago. The desire for luxury has existed since apples first appeared in the Garden of Eden. The human wish for great comfort once all other needs are satisfied, for non-essential, for rare pleasures, for self-indulgent treats and for gifts. This has been documented in history and literature, from Cleopatra to Coco Chanel. And we're conditioned to think of luxury in a very specific way. It's about sparkle and brilliance, isn't it? Things other people can't have. It's about grandeur, which reflects vaulting ambition. And also a sense, I think, that luxury consumers have always thought of themselves as being slightly closer to God than the rest of us. Served by other people, less spiritually fortunate, these people were also delighted by their craft. Long before a stitch had ever been put into a Hermes handbag or Hermes saddle, stonemasons, weavers and alchemists plied their trade to inspire awe of their benefactors and delight of their customers. It was about levels of quality and service that only the privileged few could afford. In fact, most had been born to it, or pretended they had been. And the craft and the details were, as time went by, less and less frequently behind the scenes. Fast forward a few years, it came to be even more, obviously, not just about exclusivity, and it's about show. And with those trappings of display came another luxury, irresponsibility. A devil-may-care, I only live once type of reveling, a sort of dash to acquire the most possible toys before dying, and to use them without restraint. By the 1990s, the key motives of luxury consumers pretty much everywhere were buying to impress other people. Marketers, therefore, downgraded the utility of luxury products in order to emphasize their role in the display of prominent achievement and the enhancement of social success. It was a sign to show, without any unnecessary humility, that you'd made it. It was a way to clearly identify yourself as being part of a club, however exclusive the membership. Think of it almost as being like marking your territory. It was a fantasy that a brand asked or even demanded that you buy into, if of course you could afford it. It was a pre-packaged lifestyle brands asked you to adopt. Whether your devil wore Prada, whether the guilt of Gucci graced the air in your home, you more or less knew, if you even stopped to think for a moment, what someone was trying to say about themselves with their choice of luxury brand. It may not have been subtle. Looking back, it may not even have been tasteful. But for those able to afford it, it was, I suspect, rather a lot of fun. But in the last few years, a more sceptical mindset is emerging. In the global recession, upscale consumers suffered wealth losses just like everyone else, obviously to a very different degree depending on where you were on Maslow. But there is more to this, I think, than economics. From the Chinese government's anti-extravagance campaign to the American public's revulsion at the antics of the Wolf of Wall Street, there seems to be in many parts of the world a cultural rejection of old luxury. The Chinese engine of growth is spluttering. It grew 19% a couple of years ago, only 4% last year. Shares of Mulberry plunged last month because of Korea, in part South Korea, where the luxury market only grew 1%. The conglomerate Kering posted its weakest quarterly sales growth in a few years amid softness in Europe as well as China. All is clearly not happy in the garden of luxury, and some people are even going as far as to ask, is luxury dead? Well, my view is that the concept of luxury is too alluring to be banished altogether. It fulfills a fundamental human need, or desire, if you like. It may not be as healthy as it was, but I don't think it's dead. I think, in fact, it's just sitting up and asking for another cup of sweet tea. But it's important to understand that the sector is not booming as much as before, not just because consumers can't afford to dip into it as much as they used to, but also because attitudes have shifted dramatically, and not every company has yet adjusted to this. Corporate misdeeds and perceived excess have cast the new rich as the new villains, and their lifestyles are no longer a confessable aspirational fantasy. Consumers still want more, but conspicuous consumption's out of fashion. The logo-driven excess of the past decade or so being looked on with distaste. People still want fun, of course, and to mark their progress. But many of them also want more meaning, more connection, and more substance. And so, luxury is showing us a gentler, a more discreet face. Quality's become a watchword again. Authenticity is in demand. Uniqueness of experience is key. And in this way, I think that a rehabilitation process has begun. Brands who understand this are still making great progress. Carrying smaller labels like Bottega and Saint Laurent both are performing really well, for example, in the last quarter. So let's look at how this is playing out in a couple of geographies. Louis Vuitton in China, which banked on its monogrammed, logo-laden bags, announced a significant drop last year, whereas Hermès, much more understated in terms of its branding, was continuing to grow handsomely by about 20%. As a result of these trends, I think companies in China even have started to tone down their branding in favour of a more subtle approach. Louis Vuitton, for example, is promoting its logo-light Alma bag above most of its other products. Chanel are now posting video content about the craftsmanship of their products, allowing Chinese consumers an insight into French culture. Getting the tone right clearly pays dividends. And in the world of beverage alcohol where I work, cognac and baijiu, which are 60% plus of those categories, are consumed at corporate-style formal dining tables. Those have slowed down more significantly than whiskey, which at the premium end has got a more reflective tone. Johnnie Walker Blue Label, for example, grew nearly 80% in China in the second half of last year. Similar picture can be seen in North America, where Kering have cut the number of entry products that they have by 25%, and their proportion of sales from no-logo products became 62% of their portfolio in the fourth quarter. We can see then, I think, that much of the luxury market is, in fact, still resilient. It's still on track to grow 6% last year, reaching well over $350 billion in value. Wealthy individuals in emerging markets will keep spending at home as well as abroad, with huge untapped potential. And think about it, Africa only lags Asia in terms of the number of new millionaires created each year. But if a certain type of luxury is alive and well, what's behind the change? I think there are three key drivers. I'm going to look at these more closely and see how they influence our approach. The first one is a level of unprecedented geographic and demographic change. I think we can see a new Silk Road emerging for luxury goods, a road that now circles the globe. Luxury no longer only moves along the old, perhaps insulting dimensions of west to east. Consumer movement and behaviour is dynamic. There are about 130 million luxury consumers in emerging markets. More than 10 million new people are entering the market every year. And many occasional consumers are becoming more immersed in luxury brands. For reasons that include authenticity hunting as well as pleasure seeking, more and more Chinese people, for example, are buying their goods and experiences abroad. In fact, Galeries Lafayette in Paris is the #1 retailer in the world of luxury goods to Chinese people. The next picture shows the first day opening doors of Selfridges sale in London. But it's not just about China, of course. Spending by Russians outside their home country on luxury goods grew 31% in 2012. There are bars in Turkish resorts, which are just direct lifts of high-end bars and clubs in Moscow. Frequented by Russians on holiday, guess what? The Dom Perignon and the Blue Label flow freely. Brazilians, spending by Brazilians on luxury goods in Miami alone grew 61% to more than $1.5 billion in 2012. In key cities throughout Africa, eyes that once used to look at New York and London for their trends also now look at Lagos. And influential consumers can be found from Berlin to Bogota in our broadband-enabled, dizzyingly connected world. This new dynamic, which I suppose you could call the democratization of luxury, creates a new adoption system. Most luxury companies make most of their money out of their lower price tiers, people who can afford to dip into the brands occasionally, perhaps a pair of Tiffany earrings, Louis Vuitton purse. Radha Chadha and Paul Husband, in their book The Cult of the Luxury Brand, call these people the luxury nibblers. Our 1990 model summarizes how we reach people. We talk first to the most influential 1% of consumers, connoisseurs, high net worth individuals, global influencers, exclusive offers, exclusive experiences and content. But we do so in a way that news of this, or the content itself, can be amplified at scale. It's amplified by the 9%, media, bloggers, regional influencers, and so it's overheard by the 90%, the aspirers or nibblers who purchase when they can. Kapfer and Bastian in the luxury strategy talk about the luxury gap, the distance between a brand's sort of aspirational awareness and people's ability to afford it. BMW have always applied this approach, according to them. They say in their advertising has been primarily created to stimulate desire amongst those a few years before they can afford the cars. So with the massive geographic and demographic changes I described, I think you can see how quickly this approach can become effective, especially with the digital links across the new Silk Road. But this rapid democratization of luxury also brings a new challenge: how to get the 1% feeling like they still have access to something rare that's special and only for them. So we need to keep refilling the pipe from the top with ever and ever more rare products, experiences, and content, which in turn fuels more aspiration from the 90%. In a peculiar way, elitism and democracy live cheek by jowl in the world of new luxury. Here's a small example. It's a picture of a limited edition collection of Johnnie Walker Blue Label designed by Alfred Dunhill. Beautiful, leather-bound. This trunk also contains glassware and ice tongs and so on. This is what we call our Halo Pack for the 1% and for publicity. There are only 500 ones made, $8,000 a piece, 50 million media impressions. And of course, we use this to tell stories about journeys shared and collaborations required to create exquisite craftsmanship. And this is what we did for the 90%. Also stunning, priced at a 20% premium to the already rarely priced Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Third driver of change, I think, is our cultural context. Douglas Holt, the author of Cultural Branding, summed it up when he said, strategy must move beyond the abstract product benefit description to an understanding of how a brand fits into what's taking place in culture and society. Our cultural context is continually changing. I think the most resonant brands evolve with it, not just surfing its wave, but adding new meaning and possibility. A brand with viral buzz or a slogan doesn't necessarily have cultural traction. I think cultural traction applies to brands that have myths or stories which affect how people think about themselves and the worlds they're part of, in the way that they use them to express their identity, enable community belonging, make life more rewarding. So we can see how luxury is at a turning point today. Economic and environmental uncertainty, globalization, and cultural influences are producing what I think contradictions, fundamental contradictions, giving rise to attitudinal and behavioral tensions. And where there is tension, there is opportunity. These tensions will define consumers' relationships with luxury, and I'm going to take you through what I think the key ones are in a minute. And a brand's success will in part revolve around identifying and/or resolving these tensions. I'm going to go on to talk about what I think are some specific opportunity areas. And fundamentally, I believe that we will establish salience and unlock growth, not just through the products that we sell, but through the experiences we provide and the stories that we tell. So I'm going to take a look now at the three tensions and those opportunities. I think the first tension is human versus technology. And while most of us appreciate the benefits of a faster-paced, easier-to-transact world, many of us also find that it stimulated a yearning for more connection in reality and not just virtually, and a real appreciation of time. As a result of this paradox, values such as craftsmanship and authenticity are holding ever more cachet. In a way, it's about the social currency of difference, the primacy of product and experience over image. Charles Leadbeater, in a book called We Think, says, craft is about finding goods and experiences which are personally meaningful in times when it's harder to distinguish yourself about who you are. It's a response to the anxieties about anonymity, alienation, and inferiority of mass-produced goods. I think the first opportunity we see from this is personalization, the reintroduction of difference, the celebration, if you like, of imperfection. Once upon a time, the Maharajas of India had elaborate stationery produced for them, gold monogrammed, silver decorated, inlaid with mother of pearl. A bit later, in the 1950s, Catherine Hepburn bought specially commissioned address books and engraved ones from Smithson, where she put the details of her relationships and events with people like Laurence Olivier and so on. But today, you don't need to be a Maharaja or a Hollywood star to feel special at the way Smithson will personalize your stationery. At Diageo, for the 90%, we engrave and sandblast bottles with personalised messages or even the recipient's picture. About half of all Johnnie Walker Blue Label is bought as a gift, and many of these are engraved. But we take personalisation much further for the 1%. Let me tell you a story. This is about a meeting between our guest, a man called Mr. Ho, and our master blender, Jim Beveridge. Mr. Ho is a whiskey connoisseur. He was looking for something tailor-made. The first meeting was when we got to know him, what he likes and why. And a few weeks later, he flew to Scotland for, if you like, his whiskey fitting, some blends that Jim had designed for him. He tried them on for size and agreed where to take them next. But it wasn't just about the whiskey. It was about the packaging, how to make it travel, storage conditions, bespoke cabinets. The whole experience became such a unique story that Mr. Ho loves telling it himself. And in respect to him, I'm not going to tell you the end of the story. But it does show, I think, how personalisation, service and craft can thrive to a previously unimaginable degree. And the second opportunity arising from the tension between human and technology is experiential luxury, which usually happens on an epic scale, exclusive to the 1%, noticed by the 90%. But I don't think these experiences can be something out of the Great Gatsby. The most successful ones tell unique stories. For example, Louis Vuitton sent a steam train 9,000 kilometres from Paris to Shanghai to celebrate the opening of their flagship store, to be used as a central feature in a stunning catwalk show. And the Diageo example I want to share is called The Voyager. This reproduction of a true epic journey pays tribute to the story of the Walker family. 18 months ago, this luxury yacht set sail from Shanghai, has visited ports around the world. On board, we created extraordinary environments for the 1%. Great stories were told and experienced, along with exceptional whiskies. To date, the Voyager has been broadcast also to an audience of over 120 million and has generated substantial sums from innovation alone. Such epic programs give people exclusive access to a unique set of memories and emotions. Magnified to the luxury nibblers, if grounded in substance, they greatly enhance brand admiration. Now, the second tension is materialist versus post-materialistic values. And I put forward that we're seeing a shift towards post-materialism, defining success in a more holistic way. Intangibles like emotional well-being and contributing are as laudable as material advancement. And though this is most apparent in developed markets, the emerging world is changing faster than you might think, as a second generation of wealthy people take centre stage. Millennials, if you like, are also driving this silent revolution. It's a genuine shift in intergenerational values. I think the first opportunity arising here is called intelligent luxury. People want goods and experiences to appeal and to be seen to appeal to their less visceral organs. So luxury brands are becoming a portal for richer narratives. They're facilitating questing, discovery. The Jaguar Desire film, shown here by Wes Craven, is a great example. It features characters who are exposed to risk and who exhibit a degree of humility or powerlessness, not the sort of thing that luxury characters in ads would have done a few years ago. It creates a more layered and more real narrative. An example from our stable is our collaboration with Professor Charles Spence from Oxford University and sensory architects called Condiment Junkie. The Singleton Sensorium is the world's first experience based on a scientific study into how the environment affects perceptions of whiskey. It had 3 spaces: the grassy room, the red room, the woody room. One had a turfed floor, sounds of birds tweeting, grassy smells in the air. The other had lots of round shapes and berries. Another had the sound of a crackling fire, the smell of cedar. What we found was that the environment significantly affected people's experience. In one room, they thought the whiskey was significantly sweeter than they thought in the other 2 rooms. And in one room, they liked it 15% more. So, of course, we now do this, but that was an experience for the 1%. The 90% heard it through social media, 500 million of them. Second opportunity is around content creation. Brands are rethinking the way that they talk to consumers, increasing their investment in editorial. And with consumers now being a click away only from a sale, investing in content makes increasing sense. And at Diageo, we've evolved our annual contest to find the world's best bartender, one of whom was in fact Australian a couple of years ago. We call this World Class. We now create a TV series and cocktail-making books and travel guides on social media, which help luxury consumers find the best bars in the world. The third opportunity, arising from the shift towards post-materialist values, is a more soulful form of luxury, if you like. We're moving from carefree, instant gratification in search of more meaningful returns on our luxury investment. People want to use the power of spending for positive effect. I love, for example, Gucci's Chime for Change program, a community of people worldwide promoting education, health and justice for every girl and every woman everywhere. A Diageo example is from Zacapa rum, which is distilled high on the slopes of a Guatemalan volcano. Hundreds of women in the Yucatan area are employed to weave what's called patate. That's that band you can see here, hand-woven from dried palm leaves. Each bottle of Zacapa Centenario is wrapped in that. There are nearly 1,000 women now who are involved in patate weaving. A full-time weaver can earn more than double the full-time salary of the other people in the area. Children can go to school, even nowadays to university as a result of this. In the Yucatan area in 2003, only 200 children were going to school, and nowadays it's more than 600. Here's another example of soulful luxury, but first a question. Why on earth do people pay huge sums of money to do uncomfortable things like sailing around the world on a yacht, or even contributing to that in some ways? I think it's got something to do with the following insight. I'm a successful professional, so why do I feel so unfulfilled? Perhaps if I'd been part of actually doing something. Anyone here ever felt like that? I never have. The Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge is the world's toughest rowing race. In 2013, teams set off from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean, and Talisker's role is to amplify this, tell the stories of the teams and raise awareness of it. About $2 million has been raised this way for charitable causes, and our stories have reached over 1 billion people. The final tension I'm going to explore is creation versus consumption. After the bling years, the economic crisis underlined how quickly money and status can disappear, and culture is now seen by some as the only secure form of wealth. It's about knowing more, about personal development. This implies a more active participation than before in creation, and it also reinforces the resurgence of craft I talked about earlier. People are even, on a small scale, creating their own cultural events every week. A party, shared adventure. I know somebody who's creating an extraordinary event for her upcoming wedding. An opportunity coming out of this shift is the return to time when luxury was an art form, its output being something to be admired and not just acquired, talking to collectors and patrons and not just consumers. A time when at the heart of every luxury brand was a culture that prides art and artistry. Luxury brands have, of course, always been involved in art exhibitions, but now they're creating museums, curating shows. The Fondazione Prada, for example, is a non-profit exhibition organisation with a passion for contemporary art, which ranges from design to film to architecture. And in 2011, it opened an exhibition space on Venice's Grand Canal. And I'm proud of the work done in this space by the Nolet family, who are the driving force behind Kettle One vodka for the last 300 years or more. They've dedicated the whole building next to their distillery as an art gallery. And during Art Basel in Miami last year, they also created a space inspired by the distillery, which featured design details from modern interpretation of their windmill. Copper plaques, a handcrafted bar made from real Dutch barn. The space hosted artists, music and events, 150 million media impressions. Now I want to pull this all together. I'm going to do that by showing you the Johnny Walker house. Here you can see the front of one in Seoul. Part embassy, part gallery, part museum, part restaurant, part bar, and part retail. And at epic experiential scale, which generates publicity and aspiration. These are places where whiskey can be mentored and enjoyed over fine conversation with influential people. Superb design, technology and service creates a world of luxury which taps into many of the dynamics I've talked about. Built along the New Silk Road, catering to the elite, aspired to by others, presenting heritage authentically but in a new cultural context, using high technology in a very human environment, personalizing experiences in an intelligent, even soulful way, a source of content, celebrating art and creation. It's all about stories and the liquid gold that accompanies them. We opened our first house in Shanghai in 2011, with Beijing following a bit later. This has been a phenomenal success. More than 5,000 consumers have already walked through its doors. More than 20% of those are frequent visitors and purchasers of things you can't buy anywhere else. I'll show you one in a minute. Nearly 30% of all people in Shanghai are aware of it, and 80% of those have a much higher opinion of Johnnie Walker brand than they did before. Every interior represents the heritage of the brand and its stories. The house itself is a storyteller. It's made from and celebrates the materials that are used in whiskey making: wood, copper, peat, water. One of our senior blenders says, when we talk to people about blending, we don't stand up and give them a lecture. No, we get them round a table and have what we call a whiskey conversation. And this idea of a whiskey conversation informed our entire approach. Everything within this experience is a talking point. The brand is blessed with stories. For example, in China, we tell, through newly created artworks as well as reproductions, references of how the brand first arrived in that country. The ground floor in Shanghai is the only floor open to the public. People there will find a customization counter with a craftsman who will engrave their bottle or make it different in some shape or form for them or for a gift. And people can see a 3D model, you can see it here, which shows consumers the complexity, craft and detail behind our whiskies in a way that is a mini art form in its own right. In the Johnnie Walker houses, we integrate art everywhere. Here's the Willow Pack. Each house has an offering which is unique to its location, illustrating the story of how the brand arrived there. They're priced at around $1,000 a bottle, and of course we encourage people to collect the award-winning series. This is the Zodiac collection. It offers consumers a gifting opportunity during Chinese New Year. Images of the Chinese Zodiac are sandblasted onto the bottles in gold, which are sold individually or as a set of 12 for around $5,000. And finally, here is a whiskey waterfall feature in our house in Seoul, and I don't think it would look out of place in the Guggenheim. The Johnnie Walker houses have been a bold move for us. I think you'll agree that their success stems from tapping into the cultural tensions and recognizing the new paths that luxury is taking today. Let me summarize my story. Once upon a time, luxury was a static icon. It traveled from west to east. It celebrated the world of a proprietor. And now I see it as a dynamic, evolving icon, which can be from anywhere, everywhere, and is a celebration of all of our heritage. Whereas once it was a sign that you'd already made it, a way to separate mass from class, a way of identifying yourself as part of an exclusive club, now it can be a sign that you're still on your way, a sign of progress but not necessarily completion, and a way of curating and enhancing your own personal brand. It used to be a fantasy a brand asked you or even demanded that you buy into, a pre-packaged lifestyle that you were supposed to adopt. But now, it can be about people bringing their own hopes and dreams to life, working within and enhancing their own lifestyles. And if it used to be a boutique that you had to queue up outside or get a personal invitation for, now it can be something that more people, wherever they are, can buy, view, experience, download, even all of the above. And it all happens through telling stories. Compelling stories, vivid stories, exciting ones. But also stories that at their heart are grounded, thoughtful, and true. Stories have always been how humans have interpreted life. And today, in our still evolving world, they're also a big part of how humans celebrate life. Which is why, a bit like the way that Johnnie Walker Blue Label's recent film in China brought Bruce Lee back to life to recast his messages for a new generation, I suggest that luxury marketing is by no means dead. And that, done right, it can even make a valuable contribution to life in general. Thank you.